We're ready. What's the date? 28th. We'd like to welcome everyone to our South Weber City Council work meeting today. It's April the 28th and it's about 2 p.m. We'll begin with the pledge by Councilwoman Petty, and then we'll have a prayer by Councilman Soderquist.
Please rise and repeat with me. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our most gracious Father in heaven, we thank you for this beautiful day and for the opportunity we have to gather together, talk and learn about development taking place in here in our city. We pray for thy guidance as we discuss and learn. We'll be able to ask questions that will enlighten and clear up the questions that are here, that everybody might be able to understand each other. We can move forward and helping to make the best decisions for our city. We are grateful for the opportunities we have to serve and the wonderful people here in the city. And this we pray in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Quinn. Okay, a discussion was started here recently, and most of the council, in fact, I think everyone has some questions that they would like to have answered on the Gateway project. And so we felt like it would be appropriate to set up this work session where we could address those issues or concerns, have a little discussion on the project, and hopefully get everything straightened out and everybody on the same page with this project. So I don't know if the council would like Trevor to make a presentation on the project. I told him I didn't think that was necessary. I think all of us are pretty aware of what's going on there. So we thought possibly we would just open it up for questions that the council might have, and then they'll address any concerns we might have. So,
Mr. Mayor,
yes.
since I wasn't here when all of this project started, do you think that we could get a very brief kind of overview of where it started and kind of how it's progressed, how things have changed from the original, and how we are at where we're at now?
Sure.
Sorry for my my inexperience with this project.
Trevor, can you do that in about 5 minutes? Or Brandon?
I'm going to turn the time over to Brandon
Okay.
since he was here for the whole process.
Okay.
Okay, I'll do my best. It'll be short. So there's been interest on this property for some time, a lot of years. Previous to Brad and his team, there's at least a couple others that I can think of. They kind of went away, and Brad has been the one that has gotten this the farthest. And I'm speaking from my recollection, so if I miss anything, just forgive me. When Brad first started looking at this property, the general plan said that there would be some type of a development agreement, or I forget
It had the crosshatch on it.
yes, it had the crosshatch on it.
Overlay.
So what it meant is that they would bring some kind of a plan and we would work it out. And so went down the road of bringing different arrangements and plans of what could be done there. Ultimately, which would lead to a development agreement. Ultimately, it was decided not to do a development agreement and to just move forward with a rezone. And it was 2 different zones were proposed. The CH zone, the front part, and the R7 on the back. That rezone was approved. And then at that point, Brad and his team moved forward, fitting into those 2 different zones what is allowed in those zones.
So that's when we went from a mixed use, is that right? Did we have a mixed use there? Or was that just the crosshatch?
It was a crosshatch.
It's just a
We don't
crosshatch.
have, we didn't have.
We didn't have mixed use. I think long ago, the thinking was that along this corridor here on South Weaver Drive, that this would be a good place for some mixed use, and the CO zone was created. And then the loss took place and the CO zone was axed. And so that was the end of any kind of thought of mixed use.
Okay, so that happened, and this project was where in that phase? Was it PC? Was it sketch, preliminary? When you decided to, when we stopped the crosshatch and decided not to do the development agreement?
I don't
So
recall.
I went back and I've listened to a couple of the meetings, the crosshatch, a development agreement actually came before council, or a discussion item. I don't believe it was an action item. It was a discussion item. And it was decided by the council that we were not going to do a development agreement.
So it was the council's choice, it wasn't the developer?
It wasn't the developer's
Okay.
decision. It was the council's decision to do that with a mixed bag of voting on whether that was the right decision or not. And then the rezone action was on, and Haley gave me that information on July 20th of 21. And so,
And that's when both of them were rezoned from crosshatch, or was it agriculture then, or?
It was, the original zone was just ag. The general plan is what had the cross-hatching on it to give some direction. It was always ag and then got rezoned to R7 and CH.
But the intention of the crosshatch, as I recall, was to continue to keep as a master planned development, correct? Where,
Right, I think that was the idea, because
Yeah.
in this area and down by 475 East, out by 84, those are the two kind of areas where there was the best possible potential for development of a larger scale. And so, but we didn't know exactly, the city didn't know exactly what they would maybe want there or not. And so the idea was, let's just do a development plan. Whoever wants to develop there, bring in your idea and we'll start talking about it.
so the crosshatch wasn't necessarily removed. The intention of the crosshatch is still there.
Oh, okay, so crosshatch is still in the general plan?
Yeah, the
Yes.
crosshatch exists on the general plan as the guiding principle for that area.
it just wasn't a mixed use anymore. It's more of that intent.
Okay. And then that's when it was rezoned for commercial and R7, right?
Yes, commercial highway and arsenal.
Okay. Okay. Thanks. Keep going.
Did I cover it? Is that a good summary? Anybody disagree with that? Okay.
Okay, questions? I think Angie's got to leave at 3, so I
I-
think maybe we'll begin with Angie.
Thank you, Mayor. I just had a quick question. So my question is, if you look at the code, and in having conversations with our council members, we don't have a townhouse description in our code. How did we get there? What happened? I know that there was a situation prior to you coming on board, but can you explain to me what happened?
Nearest we can figure is when we did the update of the land use matrix. It was perhaps just an oversight of the list of uses there. Haley was more involved in that process.
I can actually speak to that. To a degree, I know it was Sherry that helped us with those land use. And Jamie, I think you may have been a part of that conversation as well. It wasn't an oversight, is not how I remember not including townhome. I think that we wanted townhome to fall under the definition of multifamily, is we felt that that was a little bit more broad. And so I believe that's how I remember it, but without any documentation, I can't be for certain.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look. I mean, it was an iterative process as we had conversations about how to draw these designations. There's not a definition of townhome. I think how it occurred, at least in this zone, is that there's no specific category for townhome. And so creating townhomes as an individual platted unit that can be, purchased and resold doesn't exist under the zoning designation. You can have a multifamily I don't want to say unit, that's too fine a term, but structure that would contain multifamily units, but they would not be platted as separate individually owned multifamily units. And that's what ended up fitting in the R7 category. And with zoning designations, once you've established the designation, then an applicant can come forward with whatever they think fits in that box within those parameters. And this is what was applied for. And I think that's where there's a little bit of wrinkle in this development of, can they be individually sold or can't they be individually sold? And where we're left is, without some kind of zone change, they could not be individually sold. But if you did consider and enact a zone change, then they could be converted into that.
So quick question. I thought a townhome is just a design of a multifamily. I mean, as far as I can tell, there's no definition that says a townhome is different from a multifamily residential unit. It is actually one, it just has a certain look and feel. It still has the shared wall and those kind of things. So wouldn't this, I mean, we can call it a townhome, we can, call it anything we want, but isn't it still just a multifamily unit?
So when we determine ownership and allow ownership of various lots within a development, the plat dictates that. So there's an option for, a traditional single family plat type document. There is an option for a condominium plat, which allows for the ownership of the airspace within a unit. And then there's a townhome plat, which allows for ownership of the ground underneath with shared zero lot line walls.
And that's in R7,
That last townhome portion is not within R7.
but
The
multifamily is.
The multifamily is.
Okay.
The condominium definition is within our code and is an allowed use within that. And so that would be an allowed portion, but that's also up to the developer to determine whether they want to do a condominium plat or a townhome plat or traditional plat.
Well, but if it's in an R7 zone and it's got multifamily and it's got condo, if it doesn't have something, then that doesn't apply. I mean, they don't, no offense, they don't get to just choose, well, I want to put a baseball diamond here, they still have to fall with what we have in the zone.
Correct. It's important to distinguish that a townhome style multifamily unit would be available to use and fits within the multifamily definition because that houses the 3 or more units within a common building is the definition within our code. The townhome plat style is not within our code, allowing for zero lot lines and a shared wall with the ownership of the land underneath.
So can I ask just a clarification? And so we're calling these townhomes, correct? I guess. I don't even know that the definition matters, and I'm just going off of experience. So I have what I call a townhome because they're called townhomes in St. George. I don't own the building. The building itself is still in the HOA, and I own that. What is the problem with that being, this development being handled that way? It's still called, I mean, there's some gray area what a condominium is versus a townhome, and I really don't know that I care about that definition. I just want to know why this development, the way it's laid out, cannot be sold, the interior space be sold to individuals to own, yet the HOA still maintains the outer building. I mean, that's the way most of these condominium / townhouse places are anyway.
It's a little nuanced, but if they did a condominium plat, which allows for the ownership of the airspace within unit, then they would be able to do a for sale. And we explained that to developers. That was not something they wished to do. They wanted to do it as a townhome plat, which is a zero lot line. You own the ground underneath and everything within that individual lot. That's how they would prefer to do it as a for sale product.
But a short answer from my perspective, Blair, you could do it that way. Just the ownership of the unit would be different than if it were platted as a townhome plat, but you could do it.
So I'm just looking at our R7 code and I see, so we're going to call it multifamily because that's what is in our code. And The only difference I see with multifamily, is that there was no minimum lot area, and neither, whether it's a single family home or a family home, had a maximum. So they're multifamily, which is allowed in R7. And we have multifamily spelled out in our R7 code. It just didn't need a minimum lot area. But I'm not seeing where it says that they can't have their own lots. The only thing that I saw that was really problematic, and it's something that we need to discuss as a council, is that each minimum width or each lot should have a minimum width of 100 feet, which obviously doesn't make sense in multifamily. We need to fix that. But that was the only hiccup I could find as far as, I don't know how you do multifamily with 100 foot of frontage, which I do see they put 4 together and it shows they're 100 feet. But where this is written out in our code that it's no minimum lot area is required, where are we getting that they can't have a lot, individual lots, other than that 100 foot frontage?
There's no provision for 0 lot lines. That's needed to make individual lots for each individual townhome. And so because we don't allow 0 lot lines in that zone, they can't have contiguous units. If you look at the definition for twin home, for example, that has a definition within it that allows for a shared wall between 2 lots. And so therefore a twin home would be available for use in that because it has the provision of the shared wall. There's no provision within that for a townhome plat.
So and the developer can answer this question, or you guys can answer this question, then why we had not gone down the route of the condominium type that allowed for the space inside to be sold with 0 lot lines?
And piggybacking off that, just that you can address, when I watched preliminary, it was condo, and they mentioned, this is the condo, we'll have CCNRs and we will have an HOA. And then suddenly between preliminary and final, it seemed to change. So what happened there?
Nothing's changed on our side.
Condo?
Well, the reason I asked that is there a difference in how many units can be put on there? It would be the same layout. We'd just be calling it a condominium by our definition. Then I'm trying to figure out why this is even a gray area. I mean, I have a couple other questions, but yeah, so again, you can answer that. Go ahead.
It's always better to.
If we can have you go to the microphone, sorry.
It's always, you want me to do my name and everything? Sky Hazelhurst, 4120 Ross Drive, Ogden. So it's always better to have them independently platted in the appropriate way, which is a townhome plat, which is the ground, and you have your actual parcel number. That's the correct way to do it. There's more value to it that way. It's easier to sell. But we already knew coming into this at the preliminary stage, like Councilmember Alberts mentioned, that there was no code in place in your city to do that under the R7. So we already, legally looked into how to do a condominium plat. We can do that. We can individually sell them that way. In our opinion, is it best for the city long term? Probably not, because it's an awkward way to do it. Condos are typically meant to be vertically stacked, where they're more like an apartment unit that you sell. And the reason you condo those is because there's lots of amenities, lots of shared amenities. So it gets much harder to just have a simple parcel for each owner. So obviously we'd prefer to do it that way. That's industry standard. That's normal. Banking and lenders are used to that. It's easier to sell. It's more valuable. We already know that we can do the condo version and move forward that way. So we don't expect or support some sort of recycle through or delay based on what we already knew at preliminary.
Okay, so I just need some clarification.
Sure.
You mentioned they did not want to do condo in the email to us, and it was mentioned that's final. So you are doing condo, or you are not choosing to do condo?
At this stage, no, not at this stage.
Okay.
So we can do that later on once we get under construction and all that. Sure.
Well, but
Right.
so
Yeah.
I'm just kind of confused on this. So you're saying that And number one, I completely disagree. As a person who's owned condo complexes down in Murray, the bank doesn't have a problem with a condo. They don't have any problem, and it doesn't better our city by doing it. So I don't know where that's coming from, but you're saying that the approval process is just for the building, not for what the intent of it is, and that we can just switch? I don't,
No, if the developer wishes to turn it into a condo project, they would have to come do a plat amendment and replat it as a condo project.
okay.
So if they want to change the ownership later, the ownership rights later, they would have to come in and do a plat amendment.
And if they did it as a multifamily housing, which we do have in R7, they would also have to replat, or they would have to change something?
Right now, they're doing it as a single lot with multiple dwelling units on it, which is allowed in our code. And so as a for rent product, which is allowed. That was their choice to move forward with that configuration. As property owners, they reserve the right to use their property as they wish, right? So, and I know we all know that.
So these are actually going to be rentals then? Okay, I actually kind of like that.
Well, and I mean, to go back to the comment of it's better practice, most townhome communities are sold with the space interior. I know that for sure. And the bank doesn't have a problem with it. But it also is in a way better because you have an HOA maintaining a building and they all continue to look the same versus one person that owns to the wall and then they can do whatever they want. It becomes a mess. That's why you have that type of a development. But I mean, I guess I need to go to my bigger question, and it is to you guys. Back in July of 20, you presented to the council that based on and it's right on Collier's words and everything, stating that only 33 units would be built as you built the first phase in conjunction with the first phase of commercial. What has happened with that? And you would have 100% had a no vote from me if that would not have happened. I've gone back and I've listened. The only thing that was excluded was phase 3 to maintain one commercial building or build to suit pad. So you get that in your own words, diamond tenant. But that's gone away and you've got all the residential with, I don't see where your phasing is. The phasing in planning commission was totally different than what was agreed upon in city council. And just based on that, I will vote no. And I can tell you that right now, because that's the bait and switch to me.
Yeah, so I'd have to look back through.
I can show you. That's page 96, 97, 98 of the
Sure,
packet.
I'm not saying I disagree with you in any way. What I'm saying is, what this is supposed to be is a final plat approval based on code. Not
I
on,
understand that.
okay,
But you guys came in good faith and now you're saying you're not doing that. And it was based on 33 units and you were doing this and your phasing has totally changed what was presented in planning commission.
so we tried to do some sort of phase in writing, we could never get there. It was back and forth with staff, and then it was back and forth with council about doing.
Legal or not legal, it's a good faith thing.
Right,
You take it where you want to go with it. You guys said it in that meeting based on the zoning change and approval. It's right in writing.
yeah,
And so if you don't agree with that, I don't agree with it.
yeah, and I think all we've done now is basically follow the guideline and what was given to us, and I know right now we're still planning on building commercial.
Which guideline was that?
I'm talking about just direction over the last 6 months. So
Were you given direction to not build the commercial with the residential?
we were given direction not to, go ahead.
They, when they were submitting their project, they asked if they could submit it all as one individual project to allow for build to suit on the commercial. So if they had a larger tenant that wanted to go on a different property, they asked how they would be able to do that and if they could submit it as one project. And we said they
As
would be able
part
to
of
do
their
that.
request, as the rezone,
Right.
you go through the phasing. It should have been brought back to council for that approval. And that's my opinion. I will not there's no way I'll go with it the way it's laid out.
I have a question on the built to suit. So with the rezone was also, I think, part of Blair's motion was site plan approval must be done within 18 months. And if not, it reverts back to agricultural. If they go with a built to suit and it doesn't happen within the 18 months, does that mean that will revert to agricultural?
So they have, within the project, they have submitted a site plan with their project. So if
But it
they,
could change?
if they do a build to suit and the site plan changed, then they would have to go through the process to do a site plan amendment. So they would have to build to what they have the site plan now without any amendments. So they submitted a site plan, but if that were to change, they would have to go through the process again. And we've
I guess what I'm
notified them of that.
asking is, they could technically, just devil advocate here, be like, oh yeah, we're gonna build to suit and we're gonna wait 5 years for the right person to come to us. But meanwhile, we're gonna build a residential and the commercial will sit empty, which is exactly what Councilman Howerson is trying to state, is that we wanted to make sure that our commercial wasn't left.
Yeah.
We gave them residential to bring in the commercial. So if there's an 18-month reverter clause, a site plan's in, but could be amended at any point in time, it's a loophole.
And that was my exact comment, Haley, and I appreciate, is that I brought up, I barely wanted to not allow you to do the third phase of the commercial and give you my approval for the combination of residential. And so you're welcome to stand up there and talk. This is a discussion. And so that's why I really struggle with it.
Right. Brad Brown, 719 West, 4350 South. No, I understand what you're saying, Blair. And the intention is still, we're not trying to do a bait and switch. There was no mechanism to have multiple phases without a development agreement. So we took, as we sat in those meetings with staff, Trevor said, hey, why don't you just do it all?
You could still do a one lot, submit it as a one lot and do it in phases. It doesn't have to all be.
Phasing, without a development agreement, phasing is solely on the developer to choose how they want to phase the project.
Okay, so just to speed this up just a little bit, basically, if we wanted it phased, we need a development agreement. Yes? Okay, I don't think the council ever understood that. Is that a yes? There was,
Yeah, I think that's accurate. The only way to bring in phasing as part of a zoning approval would be as part of a development agreement, but it would be so keep in
Even though
mind.
it's part of their request, that specifically states it in their
Well,
request, that it was a rezone.
Yeah, I agree with you and I appreciate where you're coming from, right? That somebody makes a representation, they ought to honor that.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying
And I
we're
think
not
we all
going to
feel
honor
that
that,
way.
but I mean, legally, there's not a mechanism.
Yeah, we tried twice on sit downs to say, do a development agreement and.
we're talking about after the rezone though. I mean, after the rezone was done, which just to put some clarification, we all want a good product here, right?
Right.
We've all got the same goal in the end of the time. The reason why, well, for me at least, we went code is because we were trying to make up things on the spot for this development agreement. And I thought that our code was sufficient enough that it would protect us and we wouldn't miss anything. Clearly, that didn't work out very well. But I think that if the development agreement was part of the process or part of the discussion, and then we went rezone, and I think what we're trying to say is the council up here did not realize that in order to legally have you phase still, we still needed a development agreement. So while, yes, the development agreement conversation did come up, but not since the rezone. And that's why we're all just a little confused now. Does that put us on the same page?
It does. And we've had this discussion several times. So I'm sorry that it feels like we're trying to switch something. We're not. That's what staff has recommended, how we should do it.
Okay.
Yeah, we're just trying to get some sort of movement so we can, I mean, we're exhausted and we haven't even
Well,
broken ground yet. We're trying.
we're exhausted with it as well. We just didn't think we were getting this product, especially after this, when you go back and listen to the spiel we were given to rezone it and the tears that were shed at the pulpit. I mean, good heck. I mean, and it's different. It's totally different.
What's different?
Yeah, what's different?
Well, one, it's a complete rental project. Remember, the apartments were flat wiped off the table a long time ago, and there's a reason for that. And now you're presenting a full rental project, and you're not proposing to do the commercial but with half of the residential, which was in your own words, not mine.
So we're not saying we're not proposing to do the commercial. There's just not a way to, I mean, what would change on our application?
You still have a phasing plan. Currently, I looked at it in planning commission.
Of the phasing plan in our,
It's not in this document, but there was a phasing plan talked about it was shown on the screen
It
in
had
planning
commercial
commission.
was split and
Yeah,
then
you
residential
have
was
phase one,
separate.
phase two, phase three,
Yeah.
still in your proposal that was presented at planning commission.
Is that the same, that was the same phase we had agreed
No.
to, right?
No.
Totally different now.
Totally, I wouldn't even have noticed it.
Oh, look, I
It's
did.
on page 7. It's on page 7 of what you presented at the planning commission, where you got the phases listed.
And what meeting date was that?
That's the 14th of April.
so, and
For planning
I know,
commission.
I know there was in the commercial, the difference I'm remembering, and correct me if I'm wrong, Trevor, there was a phase one, a phase two, and a phase three. In phase three, we were leaving out there. That's what we talked about, right, Blair?
That you wanted to do all build to suit, which that could take 10 years. And then even in my own comments where there's no way I'm going to approve a rezone to R7 if you're not building any commercial at the same time.
Mhm.
That
So-
every city in this whole, that we've ever talked to said, do not do that, because that's what the developer is going to do. And that's what's looking like you're going to do.
Which it isn't, and we already have, and which is why we paid for engineering for those first buildings. I mean,
We paid for engineering for all the buildings.
for all the commercial
Commercial
buildings
buildings.
as well, just so you know. But they're designed and they're ready to go, and we already have LOIs from 10, so.
But the change from that third, remember, there was 3 commercial phases. And staff recommended, let's just include that third one so we don't have to go through that process again, since there was no phasing mechanism.
The recommendation came from the desire to have all of the options available. And so as we were looking at it, they have as staff, we have to present all of the available options to the developer on how they can utilize their project. So they asked, how could we do this? I said, if you want to do this and have it built to suit and have availability for all of your property, this is how you would do that.
So wait a minute, did you say it's staff's responsibility to present to the developers all the options that are available instead of them bringing it to us?
When we're in development meetings, they ask what options are available for us to accomplish this. We have to disclose the information. We can't hide the legal way to continue an application. And so they asked, we want to be able to have all of the property be available for built to suit. How would we do this? And we said, well, then you would need to submit it as a full project.
And I agree, you have to give them their options, but I just expect them to live up to what their commitments were. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, so,
And Blair, we're intending and our builder's planning on building commercial. So I don't, I feel like we're being accused of trying to bait and switch. We haven't changed our intentions. There's not a development agreement in place. So I don't know what would be.
so can I just ask you, if we were to do a development agreement, would you be willing to phase it the way that you originally presented it? We're giving you the vehicle to phase it. Would you be willing in that option?
By May 10th?
I don't know how soon we can get around to a development agreement, but I'm asking you, is that option on the table?
The option as far as the mechanism, I wouldn't take off the table, but the timing, we don't want to start over. We've gone back and forth.
I'm not talking about starting over. I'm just adding a development agreement to the approval of this thing that's coming up to us in May.
Yeah, we'd be fine with that. We got to talk to the rest of our team, make sure everyone's aware of what we've agreed to and what we're still agreeing to, but I don't see that being an issue.
I think the council just needs to understand if we go a development agreement route, will you guys honor the phasing that you originally proposed at the rezone?
Yes, what scares me is the timing.
Okay.
I mean,
Noted.
yeah, that's been our
Okay.
issue the whole time.
So Trevor, going back to our code regarding the dwelling two family,
Mhm.
I know I'm a little confused and I've gotten a couple different answers regarding development agreements. This is Trevor and Jamie. Sorry. I know I called you out, Trevor. I'm going to come back to you. A development agreement, I was understood that Dave said that may not be the best way as far as fixing the code so these can be individually owned. It would be a matter of changing city code. And then I heard actually it would be a development agreement. Can you expound on which would be better?
Sure. You have some choices on how you can do it. There are development agreements that can be used to accomplish zone changes or legislative work of the council. And there are development agreements that can be used for administrative functions, things like layouts, phasing, the sharing of costs and amenities, things like that. So here where you're talking about making them available for individual sale, that would be a zone change. And so you could do it either through a development agreement or you could do it through a text amendment to the zone that would then make that available to them to submit.
If we were to
for a new plat.
amend our code, our definition,
Mhm.
would that allow them to have the individually own lots as we understood that we would be getting here?
You could amend the code, yes, to allow for
Just
that.
that one
Yeah.
definition?
You'd allow for it to be platted as a
Townhome.
townhome.
And if we were allowed to be plotted as a townhome, what are their lot lines?
You would have to make a similar amendment to adjust the lot line requirement for that plat to move forward. So we'd have to think about the language that would be needed, but you could accomplish that.
Okay. Angie, I know you started off these questions. Sorry, do you have more you wanted to go off on?
But it's worth noting, just as part of the conversation, that if they were willing to enter into a development agreement that related to the phasing of the project, I would view that as an administrative decision, not a legislative decision. So accomplishing that by mid-May or early May really wouldn't be an issue. It would be an approval of a contract, just like any other council would approve.
And what about if we were to fix the code?
Then you would have to go through the notice and hearing requirements
Which
because
is
it's
2
a zone
weeks.
change.
From PC to CC because it's land
It
use?
would go through both, yes.
Okay. Sorry, Angie.
No, that's okay. Brad and Sky, thank you. I know this has been really a long process for everybody. I hope you can appreciate, I mean, you're well aware of how high profile this specific property has been in the city. And as you're aware, you know, representing the Pauls, how many developers came to us and said, oh yeah, no problem, we'll do the residential and then build to suit. And every time it felt like they were just trying to pull the rug out from under us. So I hope you can appreciate where the council's coming from on that and the frustration. Maybe there's just been a lack of communication all around to where it goes, right? Coming back up to us. My question would be setbacks. So if we do change that, the setbacks, and forgive me because there's 100 different, there are several revisions. So forgive me if I am not looking at this correctly, but from the charter school to the back of the townhomes on that west side, or the multi-use buildings, if I may, okay. How far is that, the setbacks?
I believe it's 30 feet.
From the charter school to those units that are on the side, it's 20 feet. The units from,
I think we changed that, didn't
Well,
we?
it says 30 on my flag.
Yeah.
I thought it was 20, I
It is
apologize.
30.
It was 20, and I think that's when you and I had that discussion, that if that code changed in the future and we wanted to be able to have a backyard setback of a townhome, future townhome flat, we would want 30 feet. So we adjusted that in preparation for a hopeful new code change, but we didn't want to muddy the waters in the meantime. So
Okay, thank you.
that was,
I have a question on that. Just, and it may be for Trevor a little bit more. I was looking at the PC packet for final. I'm not gonna be able, oh, this is the wrong development. Sorry, this internet is not loading. I think you mentioned in your staff memo that they had changed their lot lines to 30 feet front and rear. And I did see 30 feet on the rear between Highmark, and I do appreciate that. But it looks like all the front is still 20 And most of the backs, I mean, those that sit on the far east side, or the far south side, it's 20 feet is their lot, but they have that retaining wall. So it would be about 10 feet to their retaining wall. Again, just asking, trying to find a solution here. If we were to able to amend our code to allow this and create setbacks, they don't have 30 feet, that's for sure. But I don't necessarily want to write our code to this development only, because that may shoot us in the foot later. How do we even start?
So in the memo, there's 30 feet on the rear, but there's, I had put 20 feet from the building to the property line on the front. In the PUD, so when we were talking to them about how to shape those property lines, the only thing we have to go off of how we have those setbacks set is the PUDs on how those townhomes have those setbacks. And traditionally, it's been 20 feet as the front and rear setback for a townhome unit. And so that's what we had.
That's exactly where I went to in our code, is PUD. But in exchange for PUD and those kind of variable lot lines, we have things that they give back to us, such as open space that's not counted on the hill. So how do we, I don't want to give them, I don't want to change the code to give a benefit of the same benefit that a PUD does without giving what we would like back from a PUD, because then we won't get any more PUDs. We won't get any more of those that coming back to the city. So how do we change this so we don't kick ourselves later?
No, I absolutely understand. When the developer asked what a guideline would be, that's the only thing that we could give them. Well, in the past, townhomes have had a 20 foot with the shared wall. So that's where that came from. So that is the council's prerogative and to determine those setbacks and what those need to be.
Process real quick. Council's prerogative to tell staff what they should be, and staff sends it to PC and PC comes to CC.
Right. So ultimately, the city council will approve the ordinance, and we have to craft the ordinance. So yes, it does end up through that process of the council gives direction. We send it through the public process to get public hearing and the feedback from the planning commission with the council to ultimately review.
So I think the question I'm asking is, I almost said we don't know what we're doing. We do know what we're doing, but as far as just throwing out setback numbers to send to staff, like how do we know what we're doing? I mean, we don't know what's going to affect the code later on. And obviously, I mean, this is a big hiccup for not just defining townhome. We're in this position because one definition got left out. So how do we make sure that this is done correctly?
I would suggest taking our time and doing research on what other cities, there's a variety of setbacks that are used for townhomes. We've seen townhomes with a 3-foot setback to townhomes with a 20 or 30-foot setback. At that point, it is almost a judgment call from the city council on how they would like to proceed with their land use ordinances within the city. I know that's not a perfect answer, but it is a legislative item that we can provide feedback on what other cities do, and it would take some time. In the case of this development, obviously you don't want to rush into things. Staff doesn't want to rush into things. We want to make sure that we comply on that, and so that's kind of where we're left at.
I guess I'm just not understanding then. If we've got in code multifamily residential units, and we have the descriptions for them and everything in that, why won't that apply there just because we're designing them right next to each other like we're in San Francisco?
It very well could.
So we could still go with multifamily housing, especially these, I would assume all the 4s and 3s, multifamily is 4 though, right?
Multifamily.
3 or more.
3 or more? Okay, so yeah, all of them would still fit in it. So I don't, well, except the front.
Yeah, the two.
Those are 2 homes,
Yeah.
which fit in our code. Hey, you got 4 of them.
So I guess I just don't understand why, and hi, I'm new here. I don't understand why there has to be a change for it. I mean, it's in the code right now of what they could do.
The biggest difference is that zero lot line. So we can allow for zero lot lines within the R7 code.
Can you tell me what you were talking about when you say zero lot line?
Do you want me to try to, I'll try to put words to what I think Trevor's saying, but I think, Joel, all we're really talking about is how they're bought and sold, not what they look like or how they're constructed, right? Their construction drawings are gonna look the same regardless. It's just how they're platted and then how they're sold. So on that spectrum, you would have zero lot line townhome style plat, which would mean the owner of the unit owns the ground underneath the unit.
Right.
And they would own the exterior of the unit and have the right to modify all of those things. And then as you move down that spectrum, if it were condominium style, then the full facade and exterior and all the shared utilities would be common and managed by a common entity. And then what you would be purchasing is just the interior space that you would occupy, but none of the exterior.
Right.
And so
And-
I think what you're talking about is a legal fiction that has meaning and has value in a financial sense, but really doesn't change what these look like, how they're built, how they interact with the street, how they interact on internal circulation, all of those kinds of things.
Mhm.
Oh, and I think all zero lot line is that the walls between the units become the lot line
Yeah.
without any kind of setback.
And that's what a condo normally is.
Correct.
I mean, a condo is just a space within the walls.
Right.
And I guess that, I guess that's what I'm just not understanding is that, because Blair asked, regardless of what we pick, it doesn't change the amount. You're still gonna have an ungodly amount of townhomes right next to each other squeezed in this little area. So it's not going to change how many units that are going to be in here. So I don't understand why we're even looking at changing anything. Is it because multi-purpose or multifamily is going to change the design of it? It sounded like it's not going to.
Nothing changed.
So,
Right. I
So
think
it's
that, I
just the
think
way
the
they
design
sell it.
as you see it, I understand to be compliant with your current code.
Okay.
They would only then be able to be rented or bought and sold as something other than a townhome style development. So all you're really talking about is the ownership model and the marketability of the
So-
units. There are some policy reasons why cities prefer, certain styles of ownership
Mhm.
over rental, and Blair touched on some, and, as with any policy decision, there would be competing views, and you could make that decision, but I think this could move forward as designed and be constructed as designed, regardless of how it's ultimately platted. And you have some flexibility if you choose to entertain a different plat that would require a different zone, to make that zoning decision and then replat it at a later point in time.
But you guys wanted to do it as a rental.
Yeah, we want to do the plat the way we are allowed to now. And then when the project's done or under construction, depending on if something does change in the city's end and we can do a townhome plat, we would prefer that. And then it would be individually.
So
and that's just a
sold.
matter of timing so you can get started.
Right, and which is actually relatively common to, we've done it several times where you start construction on a single plat and you decide, okay, we can just sell these individually, and as they're under construction and phase, you go in and you do a replat for individually owned and sell them.
I hope you just realize the caution that we have on our end, because we have developers saying, I'll come back and I'll do that when I'm done.
And I
And
mean,
we
if
never
there-
see them again.
And if there was a way now to do a townhouse plat, we would just do it, of course. And again, we can rent if we want to, right? It's
Heck yeah,
within-
I think that'd be
within
great.
code. So I'm not trying to,
For the $400,000 that those things are, you're gonna have to rent those for pretty high penny. You might even make that a gated community, because that's gonna be an expensive rental.
yeah, it's the way things are.
That actually brings up a question I had that hasn't been answered. Those are on the MLS.
That's, yeah, one of the, so the development partner, we have Mill Creek, right, that's building these with us. I guess, one of the realtors there wanted to just test the market and see. I don't know. Was not
So-
something I told them to do.
So Trevor, I know that was brought to your attention. Is that something that is allowed?
That's a private business practice, so as a city,
Can I have you look at-
regulate that.
Can I have you look at code 11-3-1D6, please? And tell me again how this works?
Can you-
11-3-1.
Okay, while you're
Oh, I'm
doing
sorry, I
that,
thought you were
that's
asking for the
okay.
number
I
again. Go
just,
ahead.
I just wanted to kind of confer with council here. As I look at this, at all of the setbacks, it appears to me, and please tell me if I am wrong, that's why I'm asking. It appears to me that they have setbacks of 30 feet in the rear everywhere else on this except for against the hillside. Is that correct? Because you have, hold on, against the hillside, it shows 20 feet, and the retaining wall goes right through that 20 feet.
I think that middle section, 1 through, units 1 through 16.
But in the rear, it's 30 feet. It's
Are you
20
talking on
feet
the
from the
south
front,
On the south side of
on
the
the
project?
south side.
They've got like 80, 109.
That's to the top.
No.
It goes to the top of the hill.
Okay, but, so then that's my question here. We have
Okay.
between 36 and 35, it says 20 feet. Is there a reason for that, right between those two units?
To the sides.
Oh, that's between.
Oh, that's for
Between?
that, it's not that line.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying.
That's
So how
between the
far,
buildings.
okay,
There's no requirement between the buildings because if you have zero lot line, obviously.
right, okay. So that's my question here. It appears that there's enough setbacks on the rear for, I want to make sure I'm saying it right. For a rezoning. Okay, so 30 feet. And then it's 20 feet is the minimum in the front on all of these, as I can see. It varies definitely, but 20 feet is the minimum. And that meets our PUD requirements, correct?
PUD requirements allow for a flexibility of setbacks set by
Okay.
the planning commission. But typically, that's what they've given in all of the townhome projects is a 20-foot to allow for a 20-foot driveway.
Okay, so I guess, not trying to make code fit around this project, but upon close examination, it looks to me, and no one get mad at me, it really does appear like the developers have tried to work around our code as is and other codes that we have in the city. Is that a fair statement?
Our code is definitely lacking, yeah.
I
mean,
agree,
I
but
think, yeah, they've made,
Because one could argue that they would do it with, 10-foot setbacks and then still attempt to do a rezone, correct?
I would agree with that.
So that was my question. How far away is this retaining wall? And they could still own past the retaining wall. That's really not even an issue, right?
No,
Does that
it's,
work with the retaining bench?
that property line's right there.
Does
Oh,
that
never
work
mind.
with-
It goes all, so
Sorry.
Oh, no, I
it goes
just
all the
asking,
way back.
Does
So
that
those
work with
lots,
the retaining basin behind it, behind 61 and 60 also? I don't know if that counted as a setback to go into something like that.
No, it's setbacks just two property lines.
Okay, so their property line would be in the retaining basin, 61 and 60?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, yes,
Okay.
behind the home, those two units, yeah, you'd have the slope of the detention basin beginning.
How would
Unit
that work
30.
with like, say, unit 3, where right outside their door, if they were to go the 30 feet back, it would be the sidewalk of the common area?
What typically would happen is there would be an access agreement or an easement recorded that they
Okay.
can utilize that property.
Okay.
So setback defines property line, not space to a retaining wall or space to a structure.
Space.
Right, if you were to see this as a townhome plat, what you would see is each of those individual units would be a little lot, right? That would come up to the private road, and everything else around there would be common space.
So Angie, I agree with you. I mean, I think what I understood you saying is they have tried to meet our code as best they can. I think none of us expected a rental, for one. I expected different phasing. And I know you have to go, so I kind of wanted to turn this to more of a discussion of how, if we were to approve this, what does it take to approve it? Does it take a development agreement with some minor tweaks and we approve it based on these things going into a development agreement? Is that a possibility? I mean, we've talked about this. You make the motion of approval with, because I'm not going to vote yes unless it has phasing in it, because that was 100% of the discussion in 720.
Phasing with the commercial.
And allowing the sale of them. And I don't know that I care how they're sold. Does anybody, I mean, if it's a parcel versus the airspace, I don't personally care. I just like to see ownership and an HOA that maintains the property so that it's not a dump.
Yeah.
And that's really, I think, my biggest things, because I don't think we have a leg to stand on by changing setbacks and stuff, because that's what we forced them into, the going to R7 and those setbacks and all that. And I think they gave they gave us that 30 feet because we didn't like how close they were to the.
There is the issue of the rezone area, because
Yeah, there's that, the acreage discrepancy.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Can you speak to that? Do you mind?
yes,
So we noticed that too. I think
can you
Quinn,
move your mic over just a little bit?
I think Quinn might have noticed it and it trickled down to us, which we were trying to figure that out as well. All I remember during this process is we also had an unknown on the roadway section, right? The city hadn't agreed on what size of roadway, what side of right of way, sidewalks, curb and gutter, all of that. So when we first got the rezone done, we based on the current interior road code, I believe, as best as I can explain it. So we had, our first site plan, that's how we decided those lines. Then we did the rezone. Once we got the new approved road, which was much wider right of way size, I think that's when we started to alter the site plan to fit, I think. But what we didn't do is change, anything. Everything in the site plan was exactly the same.
Well, except over behind 1 and 2, where
Uh-huh.
the setback wasn't between commercial and residential.
Right.
That one wasn't there, and the only thing that's been done, according to this map, is setback has been moved, the commercial has shrunk, because the road still comes out the exact same place, so commercial just shrunk right there. And I would assume that that's where part of the growth of the rezoning of the residential happened.
Yeah, and again, the site plan hasn't changed, obviously, since we went to preliminary and then to final.
When we reached out to the engineer, Brandon can speak this a little bit more, because
Yeah.
we spoke to the engineering team. We just asked them to look at the legal description that was given for the rezone and match it to what was on the final submission to us, and just show where that discrepancy is using those legal descriptions. Is that correct, Brandon?
Yeah. Yeah,
Thank you.
the engineering firm that drew this up would be the one that'd be the most knowledgeable about why that got shifted.
Mhm.
And it's probably just similar to what Sky's suggesting, is that that road width was different than what they had in their original plan. They may have just, offset that and moved the line and not really thought, oh, wait, there's a zone line right here.
It's not atypical to adjust lot lines during that process. What probably got missed in the design phase, and I don't think it was any sort of trying to bait and switch. It was, they adjusted the lot line and perhaps forgot that there was a hard, fast rezone line
On the
that was
zone,
attached to it.
right, zone line versus lot line might have been what was missed. I'm not sure, but I know that we've got, as far as Councilmember Dills, as far as the size of retail or commercial, I should say, we should be pretty spot on. I tried to measure it on my computer. I think we might be 4,000 square foot of land, maybe discrepancy. So a little, maybe less than a tenth of an acre, but I was just guessing.
It's about 7,500 square feet.
7,500? Okay.
So it's about that
There's
section.
But I don't know exactly where that discrepancy lies. It's just if you take the rezone versus the area listed on the plans, there's
Right.
about 7,500, difference between the two.
In my non-scientific method of, I just took them as a transparency and placed them on top
yeah.
of each other.
Yeah.
There's a tiny sliver between the lot line and the landscape berm
Okay.
that could account for the remaining 3,500 square feet.
And we've tried to push these because of the wider road section now that at least we had the direction, we engineered it. There's the hillside, so we don't want to mess with the hillside too much. So we've tried to go as far as we can without getting crazy on cutting into the hillside. So right now there's at the tallest points, I think a 5-foot retaining wall, and then it goes down from there, I believe. I don't know if you've got that in front of you.
It's a little bit taller than that in the highest location, but
And we have received a geotech on that, correct?
yes.
Blair, can I make a recommendation based on your question? I think what I'd recommend is you have two different decisions to consider. One is a zoning decision. That's of whether you would allow it to be platted differently and be sold in a different way. The other is just an administrative decision that would be what's the phasing, and it sounds like the applicant's willing to agree to the phasing that was presented to the planning commission. What I'd recommend you do is consider the approval that's already been applied for, that would allow them to begin the work on the project, and consider that approval together with a very basic development agreement that really is just a phasing agreement where they would commit to the phasing that was presented, and we can use the language that was used during that planning commission meeting.
Can we also have them commit to coming back to a townhome plat?
I think that would be up to them, whether they wanted to come in for that, but you could agree to consider a townhome plat if they applied for that zone change.
I just
And
don't
then-
want to give them the development agreement to allow it and then.
Well,
have them-
what I would recommend, I guess, is handle the phasing as part of a development agreement, but don't do the zoning work with the development agreement. Do the zoning work as just a change to the R7 zone.
That's all we need.
That would then make the application for that kind of plat available to this developer.
Well, I understand it'll make it available to it. What I'm worried about is him not coming back and doing it.
I don't think,
No,
I have
we
no
can do that.
concern that they would,
I think we could initiate that, couldn't we, Trevor?
Yeah, you could initiate the zone change on your own. What you wouldn't be able to initiate on your own
It's a plat.
is their choice to
Yeah, we're
avail
talking
themselves
about
of that.
them-
And I guess Haley, forgive me on that because I'm hearing mixed opinions from the council on that. And so I think you have a decision to make as a council, and
What I'm worried about is that we
That's
give
the-
them the go-ahead to go ahead and build it and it's rental only, and they'll say, yeah, we'll come back and make it so you can sell it, and then they never come back.
Yeah.
I apologize that I have to leave. I agree with the development agreement for the phasing. I agree with Jamie's opinion, though, to leave that rezoning out of the specific development agreement for now. That would be what I support. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.
Well, I won't support it without the plat. I'm not gonna let them, and forgive me, but I'm gonna make sure that they come back and give us exactly what we're wanting for as far as it being owned. No, it's another in good faith. In good faith, we're allowing you to go forward with this with the hope that you'll come back and make it so it's individually owned. I'm not okay with just making it available to you and hoping that you'll come back and platting it that way.
Well, I think they prefer it to be able to be sold. Don't
We do, absolutely, 100%. But I wasn't aware of I still thought we as the owner of the property could decide. I didn't know that would be something that would be taken away from.
I'm not, it
the
wouldn't be,
land
it would be an agreement. Would you agree? We'll agree to go ahead and approve it, and if you do the phasing and, come back and plat it.
Mhm.
If you don't agree to it, then of course, that's not an agreement. I'm not trying to force anything on you. I'm just saying, would you agree to have that in the development agreement?
Yeah, as long as it doesn't delay anything, I don't see why we wouldn't agree to plat them individually. It's always better in our opinion anyway. We're happy to do that. Of course, we do truly want to sell these units. That's what our partner has said. That's the only studies we've ever done. We haven't done any rental studies.
Well,
at
that's why I
this
was
point.
still trying to figure out why you just didn't do condominium.
Yeah.
It just didn't make any sense to me why you didn't do condominium, because it doesn't even change the project. And you're still selling them, and you're
And-
still selling them for the
sure.
same price.
Well, from what I was told, again, from other people on our team, Councilmember Halverson, I'm trying to answer your question.
I know.
and I'm being very genuine. The direction I was given was that process is laborious and hard to do compared to a townhome plat. And I'm not the expert in all things plat. So-
I can say that a townhome plat, or a townhome plat is much, much simpler than a condo plat. Because a condo plat, you do have to come back after they're built and survey in, exactly where the walls ended up getting built. Versus a townhome plat is just simply what you kind of have before you now with the blocks of, ground delineated. So if
No.
that was the reason why you were told, that would make sense.
That doesn't change the value of it. And you still even on that type of plat, it can't just be a block, because it has to be assigned a meets and bounds on a townhome plat. You still have to have a meets and bounds. It still has to be surveyed where
But
that
it-
wall is, if that's your lot line.
Well, but they can, it's only a horizontal issue.
Right.
As soon as you do a condo plat, there's a vertical element to it.
Right. And I'm only familiar with townhome plats, which is what we've done, which are much more of a survey type of thing than some sort of airspace. So, but if there's a way to do this, to agree to come back and individually plat them as a townhome when that language is available, that code, if there's a way to agree to that through a development agreement and legally, I'm happy to have our entire team agree to that and come back to do that.
Okay,
So-
thank you.
Again, this is a May 10th, priority for us. That's what's important for us. So, but we will jump through any hoops that you guys want us to try to jump through.
Well, I hope you realize
Yeah,
we're
the
doing
one-
the same. Otherwise, it was just a vote no on May 10th.
Yeah, that's why
Or
we're
we wouldn't
here.
even be here in this room taking half of my day off for
Yeah.
you.
That's exactly
I
why we're
appreciate
here.
that.
So
Sure.
I'm being awful generous with you, because right now it's a no.
Yeah.
So I just, that code that I mentioned earlier, I don't know if you guys have had a chance to look at it, but it says no plat shall be recorded in the office of the county recorder, and the lots included in such plat shall not be sold or exchanged, and no offer shall be made to sell or exchange any lot unless and until the plat is so approved, signed, recorded, and until all fees are paid.
When we reviewed the documentation, because we received some documentation from Councilmember Dills and others regarding the issue of whether this was, each unit was for sale and how that was done. We reviewed that with legal counsel. As a city, we could pursue legal action if we would so wish, but we provided notice to the developer that we have noticed that this was out there. But at face value, it was uncertain whether it was an investment opportunity or a for sale opportunity. And so,
Well, you have two
That-
lots under contract now, according to the MLS. So it's kind of hard for us to be getting things from our citizens being like, they have two lots under contract. Meanwhile, you're bringing forward a rental single lot development.
I can follow up with Mill
Please
Creek and
do.
see what's going on,
Please do.
because I'm not in that department whatsoever. I was not aware of that. So thank you for telling me. I'll make sure to get on that today.
So we're here for a work meeting, not for action, but to make sure I'm clear on kind of what the next steps are. By a nod of heads, is everybody comfortable if I put pen to paper and prepare a simple development agreement that would address really two issues. One would be the phasing of the development, that it matched what was presented to the planning commission. And then the second point, a commitment on the part of the applicant to seek to replat this development as a townhome style development once the city gets in place the zoning regulations that would allow it.
I am.
Do I have? Okay, great. I'll begin work on that, and we'll work to try to have it ready before the May 10 approval deadline.
I do have a few other questions if the work meeting continues, but.
Yes, go ahead.
Go ahead.
And these are maybe more concerns, and maybe that's not what we have here, but I'm concerned about the 11-foot, we talked about the hillside retention thing. As I look at the distance between the back of the buildings and the retention wall, it's like 10 feet. And so if you have a 10-foot gap behind the house and an 11-foot wall, we've had slides in the city off these hills. I hope our geological engineers know, and it's more just a comment statement. I'm concerned about the safety of that. In your summary, Trevor or staff, you talked about the water mains through the development will be public, but all other water facilities will be private, and all the sewer and all the storm drain facilities will be private. Is that, I just don't understand what that means relative to any other development. Is that just standard? That's normal?
It just means that they are responsible. The homeowners association for this is, however they set that up. They are the owners of those pipes, so cleaning, maintenance, all of that is theirs, not the city's.
But that's what we have in other townhome or other places. It's the same.
Yes, but it sometimes depends on maybe what's being connected to what. This is kind of a standalone. It all drains, down to one point, like for example, on the sewer, it's its own sewer system. So it makes perfect sense that it can be private. If you've got, outside flows running through here, then it really can't be private, right? Because we are responsible for that. So there are other areas where like the sewer system is public. But this one makes sense to be able to have that be private. There's no advantage to the city really to have it be public. We're only making public the things that we feel like are absolutely necessary to be public.
Yeah. And that answered my question. Just, is it different than what we typically do elsewhere? Just kind of, the language sounded unusual to me, so, okay.
Yeah.
We also have a comment about the family dwelling shall provide enclosed outside storage space of at least 30 square feet for each dwelling unit. And then their plan is the space will be provided in the garages of the unit. How do you guarantee that that space is there? I mean, once you sell it to somebody, they don't have space. They build a whole bunch of shelves, they do whatever else, and that space is no longer really there for the next person. Or, I mean, is there a concern with using interior space as storage?
Can we answer that one?
Yeah, please.
So when we read that part of the code, again, we've been digging through this code, trying to follow it the best we can, but my interpretation is the garage classifies as storage and it's bigger than 30 square feet. I don't know, is that not the interpretation?
I just don't know the reason of the code even having, why do we
I don't know
dictate
either.
that you need 30 square feet of outside space?
So I think you normally see this in like apartment buildings. They'll have that space off the
Right.
apartment. I found the exact same thing and was trying to figure out if a garage counted for it and everything. From what I understand is you have your garage that will fit a car, and in addition to a car, you still have that 30 square feet. Is that my
Right.
understanding? Or is that 30 square feet? Well, I guess what I'm asking you is a car going to hit that 30 square feet? Or your garage is big enough that
If you
a
have
car
big
can fit,
car, yeah. it's not-
and you can have your 30 square feet?
So the
You
I
see
guess
Blair's
depends
big
if you-
truck out there?
right. if you,
Does that fit in your garage on 30 square feet?
To put
Yeah.
it maybe in the perspective, 30 square feet is a 3 by 10 or a 20 by 1.5 portion. So it's not a substantial amount. And so that's where it was during it in the code when we, because this is something, as I got on, I looked everywhere for a definition of what outside storage was,
Me too.
and I could not find one. And so with a garage having outdoor access, we determined that that would be considered.
Yeah, so again,
outdoor.
going back to what precedent has been set in the city, if you go to the other townhome areas, they don't have 30 square feet of outside storage. They use their garage as well.
Mhm.
Two other questions, and they're mainly on the safety issue that I've stressed all along. I'm still concerned with children trying to walk to Highmark to and from. As I look at the plat, it looks like they're walking right through the construction commercial areas. There doesn't seem to be a pathway that takes them to the south and west, but it actually goes right through the center of that. That's the only pathway I see. So we want our children walking through a whole bunch of commercial and cars driving in and out every day to and from school. That's a concern I have.
Just so I understand, are you talking about like the sidewalk path that goes to the south or along South Weaver Drive?
No, I'm talking about the one that comes from the development where the
Sidewalk, it goes between those
townhomes are. You have all
two
that walkway
commercial buildings.
behind.
It goes past lot 19 or unit 19.
19, it goes right into the commercial and right out to South Weaver Drive. Do you know where I'm
Yes,
talking about?
yes,
Yeah, so, I mean, that's the path of shortest, distance. Any kids in that development, in that neighborhood are gonna walk to Highmark right through a whole bunch of commercial.
Well, commercial, and those are actual drive-through.
Right. There's
So,
a continuous,
yeah.
potentially continuous cars driving through there. So I would recommend seeing if there's any way that that walkway can continue straight east and go around the commercial somehow. I mean, maybe
Between
Highmark
them,
would
like,
allow you to take it right
right
into
there?
their little retention
so,
basin.
so you're
whatever.
talking
Oh.
maybe running it along the east property line?
Right.
so I can speak to that. We had a version of one time, I'm going off of a basic plan. I don't have the numbers of the numbered units or anything, so I'm trying to follow along, but we could do a sidewalk. Okay, so in the entryway, there's the two unit buildings, right?
Right. Yeah.
So the 2-unit building to the east, we could continue our path and sidewalk.
To the east. I'm
You mean
talking on the
west?
east end of the
Or
development,
the
right
east
next to
end.
Highmark.
Yeah.
Yeah, not over the west end, the east end.
You're thinking they're gonna come down this trail.
I'm fine with that.
Trail, that's the only.
I think that's cool.
So we
So you have to walk all the way out here and walk.
Yeah, if you
down.
could tie that into the retention pond even, I think, get them off South Weaver Drive and they get to school faster.
Yeah,
As long as
I
we
mean,
have enough room before our property line ends.
right, and the other option would be to work with Highmark, and if you can just take them right through their retention basin into the school. then
Well,
they
the
don't
city
have to
owns
go
that
south.
property, just so you know.
Oh, we own it? Okay.
We own that retention
So why
pond?
don't you talk to a city? Anyway,
I think, to be honest, I think it's a great idea, and I agree with the safety concern.
I mean, I can see you having it open, because if you have somebody who wants to walk in and get a drink or whatever,
Right.
that's fine. I just don't want it to be the forced direction for the kids.
Yeah.
So the other concern with the safety though is, UDOT has agreed to allow you a turn lane in and out. Currently, right now, we have Highmark parking all along where that turn lane is going to be, halfway down South Weaver Drive there. And this is again, more just question that needs to be addressed. What's going to happen when we have all of the Highmark parents picking up kids, parking all the way down that entrance and exit lane? Now,
Can I follow
Yeah,
up
go
with that? I know that Councilmember Petty asked about meeting with Highmark and kind of discussing, has there been any discussion there?
Yes, David and I met with Highmark on Monday this week, and discussed the plans there for the development to the west of them, this development. And so there was nothing concrete from that meeting, but it's the beginning of many conversations. The issue at hand is that this development isn't necessarily causing the demand that it's Highmark, and so it is Highmark's issue to resolve, not necessarily the developer's issue to resolve, although it will impact the developer, absolutely, because we'll have parents most likely utilizing their parking spaces or our access lanes to do this. So
And did Highmark have any,
they don't have anything. They
did you
were
give them
looking-
mine and Angie's really great idea?
We had discussed looping them around the back. They talked about maybe some logistical issues on there. They expressed that they don't have a lot of funding, right? They get their funding from the state, and so their options for purchasing more land or anything like that is limited. They felt that was something that it was the city's responsibility to provide, and we told them, unfortunately, that's your responsibility as a landowner within the city, that you have to contain your own traffic and manage that. So it's the first of many conversations we'll continue to have with them.
Yeah, because obviously that's going to suddenly be a red curb and nobody can park there.
Yeah, there'll be some portions that they'll be able to park still. I don't believe the whole curb is going red, from what I remember from our conversations with UDOT.
Well,
I would think it should.
they will be, I mean, the turn lane will automatically restrict any parking there. We still have the ability with UDOT's approval, if we wanted to red curb the whole thing. I don't have
It's
any
something that needs
issues
to be
with that.
addressed. Yeah, we don't have to decide it here, but
Yeah, that is a discussion that we as a city need to have, I guess, walk the line between working with Highmark, recognizing that they have challenges there too, but recognizing that there's certainly major safety issues, and I share the same concerns. Every time I drive by that when they're dropping off or picking up, it makes me nervous.
Yeah.
Just the way all of that's handled. But that really truly is a discussion and needs to be resolved between the city and Highmark.
Okay.
This will accelerate those discussions.
yes, yes. So I'm sorry, I do have one more item.
Sure.
And I think I understand why it's there, the berm with the 3-foot fence rather than flat with a 6-foot fence between commercial and residential. I really struggle with that. 3-foot fence, anybody can just step right over. I mean, there's a reason we have a 6-foot. So is there a reason we didn't put a 6-foot fence there? Is it
Yes,
cost savings? Is it?
No, it's actually more expensive to do it this way. So if council decides they prefer that, we'll do per code. And you
It
can
would-
make that call.
If I remember PC right, it was an aesthetics thing.
Yeah, and we agreed with
No.
PC that we thought it looked better.
Well, yeah.
Well, it was brought up in PC about an aesthetics thing,
Yeah,
I mean, it looks
and I
nice.
kind of agree with it, but
Functionally,
I think it looks nice.
put the berm and a 6-foot.
Problem is the berm runs right into the commercial parking lot, and if some little kid come rolling down that hill right out into that parking lot, watch out. That's my concern.
Yeah, especially with the snow.
And you know how kids like to jump fences. and
Yeah.
That
hide
is
and
a,
seek And whatever else, they get a slope like that and they
Yeah.
can easily come down there.
yeah.
Well, and this,
Smack.
yeah, this isn't even an actual fence though. This is just,
The rail.
yeah,
the
just
rail
a couple
fence.
of rails going across. My concern is that the reason why we have a buffer zone between commercial and all the residents that are going to live there is so that as all of these people come in for their morning Joe, they're not getting the car lights, they're not getting the trash blowing through, they're not getting the problem of living right next to a commercial unit, hitting all of their property.
Yeah.
I do like the trees that are going to be going there, and I think the buffer zone, having all those trees nice and tight when they're mature
Yeah.
is going to be great. But since you're just going with code, that means they're going to be twigs that are going to be there for the first 10 years, not really blocking much. So, yeah, to go from an actual solid wall to that, I have a hard time with, although I do think it would be very good looking. I just hope that as we're going through this process of give and take, you realize that we still want that good looking
Yeah.
for a buffer. And I obviously think that helps you guys out as well, but I have real concerns for the protection of the citizens that are going to be living there, because you guys will be done, and then we have South Weaver citizens that need to. I've still have a question, and I'm just going to bring it to you, is that I don't see how garbage is going to be picked up there with the T that is on the eastern side. I do not see how a garbage company is going to be willing to come in, pick up cans on both sides and somehow make that possible, especially where they only have the pickup on one arm, which I know that's going to be part of the homeowners associations, and they're going to have to fix that. But I would feel a lot better if you guys start investigating that now and have a company that says, oh yeah, this is going to be easy, because having these townhomes or whenever pull it all the way to the end, I don't think is an option.
It's the cities, I mean, they're using the city garbage pickup, if I was understood
Oh, are
correctly.
they?
I don't.
As part of the,
They have the option of choosing. their
Yeah, and
garbage
so
company, so.
And the reason I was gonna bring up, that's one of my last points that I was gonna, hopefully they could resolve, but before May 10th, but, because, and again, going back to another development, has this exact layout, and the local city, garbage pickup would refuse to pick it up. So they're putting it all out on the main road every morning. So that would be South Weaver Drive in this case.
Yeah, that
the windiest-
wouldn't work.
Oh,
We'd have
I
to-
know, I'm just saying, but it's this exact,
yeah,
Right, so
T.
you'd have to, I mean, you'd have to work with Robinson to
Yeah.
say, you can't make them pull them out to here. You're gonna have to work with
that's,
them,
that's all.
or
I-
they get a different company.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's all I'm gonna say. That's kind of your deal. I mean, but
Yeah.
it has been an issue with those bullhead teeth.
Okay, that's good to know, actually. Let me see what I can do before.
Can I just ask on that? And I know that this buffer that we have is a decision of the council. If we were to require you to do the masonry wall, do you have the 20-foot buffer that it would require? I'm trying to measure it out here.
So they, code would require it to be on the commercial side. They've requested to have the buffer zone be on the residential side leading up to the commercial with a
Okay.
smaller portion.
Okay.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
that's the variation that they're asking for there, and that is completely, under the purview of the council to decide on. So you could say, go with exactly what code has. You could say, you can keep.
They
that
have the
buffer
room
yard.
either way.
Yeah.
Okay. Just one thing that my internet won't work on now, and it's driving me crazy. One thing about the rail fence is, if you notice, those garbage cans for the commercial are right there. And I don't know if you've been to like the Riverdale where, what are all those restaurants? And Mod Pizza and over by Hobby Lobby, they have their trash cans about 20 feet away, and you can smell them at the restaurant. So I'm a little nervous about the buffer, especially if these are restaurants that come in on the east side. There's really not. Is there going to be a brick facade for those dumpsters?
Oh, yeah, like a corral, you mean?
Uh-huh.
Yes. it's
So it'll be
drawn in there.
the what did you call it? A corral?
A corral, yeah.
And then a rail fence if we go as proposed.
Oh, yeah, you wouldn't just put a rail fence around where they go.
Yeah.
right? No,
Okay.
yeah, it would be a separate.
I feel like that masonry wall might be a little bit of a buffer just from the garbage can, honestly.
Yeah.
But just while we're talking, I noticed that you took out the trees from preliminary to final, the trees at the frontage. Was that, did I
So-
understand that correctly?
So there's two landscape plans. They submitted two separate plans, one for the commercial, one for the
Uh-huh.
residential. We still show all the trees along the front
All
on
on the
the
frontage?
commercial
Okay.
and on the residential
Okay.
designs. And
I
stuff.
did notice that there was quite a decrease in plants that you guys submitted. I asked Trevor about it, and he mentioned that you guys were seeing that we were trying to be water wise. I don't know how the rest of the council feels, but I think especially after some things that we learned at our conference last week, that water-wise is the goal, not plantless.
Right.
So, I know that you still have met your 15%,
Yeah,
but, we want it to be a beautiful development, and I think that there's a lot of value in having water-wise plants and not just going barren.
yeah,
So that's just my personal feedback for you on
okay.
it.
So I just have one question, and it's one for try to understand. So I understand where all the stuff that's being approved on the R7 side. So the commercial side, and this is going back to what was said before, how are we approving anything on the commercial side if it's all build to suit? So because to me, it would seem like, why are we doing any approval on the commercial side if there's nothing really to approve, because it's all going to change unless we're just proving the parking lot?
So what they're proposing is that site plan. If that site plan changes, if that site plan changes, then they would have to get a site plan amendment. We've done that with other projects, like the Sodalicious Ski and See that we did. Even though it was a minor, they changed a driveway and added some parking, they still had to go through the site plan amendment process. So they're requesting the site plan that's there with their understanding that if the building footprint or anything changes about that site, then they cannot build it until they get an amendment of that site plan.
Okay, so how does that then work with a phasing?
Because they're, just like they said earlier, they've already designed these buildings.
Okay,
Yeah.
Those
So-
buildings have already been designed.
so those buildings will be built the same time the residential is going to be built. And then if somebody comes in for, before that is done, or if they have changes to that specific building, then we'll do that. Okay,
And those plans are gonna all come forward.
Yeah.
That you'll see the design of them eventually.
Are those LOIs still the same LOIs that you brought to us last time?
There's a couple new ones.
Oh, what you got? If you don't mind me asking.
I don't want to disclose yet.
Oh,
until
okay.
we get a lease done,
All right,
because we're competing for space, right? So
Sure.
we gotta,
that is a
Um,
good point.
but I did.
But
wanna
you do
mention-
have LOIs.
Yeah.
Okay.
Three right now.
Okay.
I did want to mention, yeah, as you'll see, if we get a good commercial user here, whether it's a restaurant with the drive-through, without, likely they might ask for some changes. Maybe it's 3 foot longer building one way or the other. So hopefully we can do those changes when need be, that we can work together on those. But we are excited about the commercial that we have. We have them designed. We are going to break ground. That's why we're not afraid to phase. We just didn't have it in any kind of agreement that anyone had on either side. But we're fine, like I said, memorializing that.
Just so that you're aware, if there is a site plan amendment that they request, that only goes to the planning commission. Just, so if there is a small change like that, don't expect to see it at your level.
what's considered small then? Just,
Well, like if they have to change the building configuration such that they change the parking lot, let's say, they would still have to meet the code, right? So if that use requires this many parking stalls, we'd still have to verify that all still works. But it's different than what was approved, so it goes back to the planning commission so they can say, yep, that's okay.
but we don't have a square footage or any type of definition of what's small versus large.
The change, you mean? Small change versus large change?
Yeah. Again,
No,
just-
I mean, I guess if they were proposing to eliminate one of the buildings, then, yeah, that wouldn't fly. If they chopped one in half, that wouldn't fly. I don't know.
Because I can understand adding, 100 square foot to something to make it a little bit larger, even 1,000 square foot or whatever. But I would assume that there would be some type of limit that would bring it up. Again, this is just a.
Right, yeah. I guess it's a little bit of a judgment call, to be honest.
Okay.
If it feels like it's substantially different, then we'd address it that way. The buildings aren't huge.
Yeah.
Okay. Some things that we would look for is traffic flow patterns, if they're changing the traffic flow substantially. So it's a not recognizable project that was similar to us, then we would say, okay, that's too much. But if it was, we bumped this out and we changed the drive-through lane this way and it hasn't impacted any other part of the development, then that's a smaller change.
And I talked to you about this yesterday about a lighting plan, and I still don't see any type of lighting. And I know that, again, I wasn't part of the council at any time that this was approved, but I thought I remember with the car wash, they had to have a lighting plan that showed, because of the residential areas around them, that the light wouldn't go a certain distance and the signs wouldn't go a certain distance and any of those kind of things. I haven't seen anything like that, and I don't even see really the lighting, the street lights that's going to go on the residential side either. And I expected to be able to see that, especially where the residential and the commercial are just so close to each other.
They could, I suppose, have a sheet that just only shows the streetlights, but they are labeled on there. They're labeled as SL with a little, looks like a, dark dot and an oval. Kind of looks like a toilet, I guess.
See, I thought they actually were toilets, so that makes a little bit better.
Just scattered
They're on
around.
the corner. Yeah, they're on the corners.
I'm country.
So
I am
there's-
not an expert in hieroglyphics either, so I rely heavily on Brandon to interpret those.
Yeah, so they are included.
Okay.
There's not a lighting plan per se, though.
Do we have something in code that says how far or close they need to be or anything like that, or?
No, not really. I mean, they're lighting the street. As very, just the standard. There's nothing else. There's nothing proposed here that's outside of the norm or what's typical.
Okay.
And I don't have it in front of me, but my assumption is when we build this, the street lights that are on the commercial and residential boundary there are gonna be 180 degree, right? They're only facing that way. They're not gonna be like a 360 degree parking lot light. If that makes sense.
Okay.
Obviously, we're not gonna shine the backyards of our residents. It'll just go.
Because again, that area where we were talking about with the two drive-through restaurant type things or
Yeah.
drive-through, I would assume that there would be heavy lighting around that, just because of the, the dangers with traffic moving in and out and everything. So that's kind of why I was really hoping to be able to see the lighting on it, because obviously it's not going to be able to go on the wall over here, the buffer shining over that direction. So yeah, I think that's just, I just wanted to make sure that we did have some type of lighting on it. Thank you.
They do not show separate, like parking lot lights or things like that in the commercial, other than the buildings themselves.
So then how would that be handled if they start putting in lights? Because we do have code that says it cannot disturb or
Right.
or whenever the other units. And at 19 and 20, obviously from the plans, there's not any windows on that side, if I remember right, of your townhomes.
Oh, I don't think so.
Okay.
Enough memory.
So then we're really dealing with the others that are 10 through 16, those two groups right over there that would definitely have a lot of lighting issues. And then of course so basically anything that's on the north side is always going to have that kind of issue. So if I take it that if we just approve this now, that loses the ability for it, or then it becomes a code enforcement issue. I don't know.
Well, lighting's can be delicate, right? Because for safety reasons, lots of times, people prefer to have a little light, but there's also a level to where it gets to where it becomes a nuisance. I guess I would, Sky, you may not be able to answer this, but if you have planned that as far as like what kinds of, lighting is going to be on the buildings.
No, and unfortunately, we can't this early on in the process. I think it has to be part of the permitting process and the sign when you get a permit for your sign. Because, we don't know exactly which users. Somebody might love a really bright sign that we need to tell them to tone it down, and others might have, some tenant wants us to, cheapen it up, and we need to tell them, no, you need a little bit more safety lighting. It's all just kind of dependent
Right.
on these.
But the
tenants.
parking lot lighting, you guys should be able to know right now, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
And,
That's something that maybe we can have a discussion offline about.
okay,
And I think
Yeah.
the bigger concern would be the nuisance lighting of headlights, which
Yeah.
goes back to whether you
buffer.
do what type of buffer you do.
Yeah.
Well, whether we do that or a wall, I think that split rail fence should come out, because light's gonna go through that. You've
Yeah.
gotta have a solid 3 foot.
These are
wall.
2-story, correct?
Yes.
The other one along those lines of the fencing, we're kind of leaving it in the air on the fence between the retention pond and the development. It
Highmark?
just, well,
on the
high
South
mark,
side?
yeah,
side?
on the east side.
Mhm.
It just says to be determined between the two property owners, basically. Let me open this back up. It says,
Does it? There's
6
a-
foot screening fence along property line between residential zone, coordinate with existing property owners whether to change existing fencing.
By the south end?
Well, that's along, there's a small portion along the south, east end where you've got residential,
Cornelius.
along
okay,
Cornelius.
that's,
And then along the whole south border, and some residents already have fencing there, and I think what that note is intended to say is,
well, I guess it's the same note as the one along the back, I guess.
yeah, if they have, so the fence along the detention basin is a chain link fence, it's intended to
And we're
just
just,
stay like
it's just
that.
staying the way it is.
Yes,
That's, okay.
yeah, there's no requirement to change that.
No, I know, it was a question and
Along the, which direction is east side between the retention pond? That is a chain link fence on along the whole thing. Residential up going to commercial, correct?
yeah,
I know.
that's the fence I was,
Oh, I thought you were talking about
Mhm.
south.
that's east.
There,
I'm
it
talk-
stops at the Fernelius line. So you were talking
Right.
about the Fernelius line.
Nope,
and
I'm
she's
talking
about
behind-
the Above, I think.
I'm talking behind 20, unit 20, yeah, behind Highmark, next to Highmark.
That's what I was talking.
Yes,
Okay.
up to where it changes, there's a property line, and that's where Fernelius's
Yeah, I
property
hadn't seen
starts.
it, I didn't see the dotted line.
It's
separation.
chain link up to that point, from South River Drive back to that point will be chain link, staying just like it is, currently exists.
So even between the commercial and the retention is just chain link.
Yes,
Because they're.
yes, because they're both commercial, there's no zone change there.
Yeah.
But beyond that is where they'll have to either put a screening fence if none exists, or work with the current owners, you know, if they want to leave their own fence in place.
Now, those fences all along the south side where the property owners are, I know that there's a lot of those fences. I don't know how many, shouldn't say a lot, but they're not on property lines.
Right, right. So they'll have to resolve that issue.
Yeah, okay.
Yep, and they will.
so with the addition of the wall that's going in, since that's a change, is that an approval?
Yeah, that's a legislative approval for the buffer yard.
Okay.
Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I'm just wondering, kind of Quinn's questions got me wondering, is it better to do a tiered? Is that more structurally sound?
Are you talking
the
retaining wall?
retaining
Yeah, the
wall,
retaining
sorry.
wall, sorry,
I
yeah,
was thinking the.
yeah,
They in the geotech report, they address the ability to do it in tiers or to do it as one solid, you know, height. The whole thing is not 11 feet. There's only a portion that gets up to that point. So what they've done the preliminary work to establish what it would need to be. But before they can actually build it, there will have to be a detailed design stamped by a geotechnical engineer that I will review to just make sure that it's sufficient. But the liability of making sure that they've done their analysis right is on them. And
Until
that's
it's
as
not.
much
yeah.
as we can require.
When you see some of these walls that are going up these days, this retention wall right here is nothing.
Right,
Look what they're doing up here in South Ogden by the water tanks.
Yeah.
Holy
Yeah.
smokes.
yeah, there's some pretty amazing retaining walls, and we've discouraged, trying to make it so that they were not getting into the hillside as much as possible, and they have complied with that. They have tried to get everything inside as much as possible, not to eat into the hillside. And I'm satisfied with what's been submitted thus far, that it's sufficient. And we'll review before they actually build what they're proposing to make sure that it also meets what it needs to.
Okay, because the part of the reason is, and I went back to a question I also asked you earlier, was if the hillside is being counted as part of the project, because it is being counted in the calculations of density, well then, doesn't that mean that it also should be in the landscaping requirements for residential? And I don't know if there's any landscaping requirement in residential that has that much open raw weeds.
Right. Yeah, and I recognize that it's not going to be grassed, but that's on purpose. I mean, we do not want them irrigating that. Even if we did,
No.
even if we had plenty of water, you
No,
want
but also,
water.
I also look behind the Cambridge Apartments, and I don't want a fire hazard of 4-foot tall grass that's growing there the entire summer.
Right.
I
No,
don't think that
I-
does us any advantage either. So I don't know where that level of landscaping needs to be.
It's probably a code enforcement if it becomes a problem.
Okay.
Yeah, so as we would look at the property owner at that point and notice the violation of like excess weeds, and they would have to
Okay.
mitigate that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay,
I have just one final thing. It's
Okay,
not a
Haley?
question, it's just more of, I know that the PC packet came out just 2 nights before the planning commission meeting, and I'm sure there's a reason for that, but I know that that was very difficult. I've gotten responses from a couple of them about how difficult that was to try and make a recommendation or for approval. Some of them had like 15 minutes to review it. So I know that they need to have it in 3 weeks beforehand to be able to be on the next agenda. Is there a reason? I've seen this kind of happen a lot with the planning commission where they get their packets so late. Can you enlighten what happened there?
This is definitely the latest. What had happened was Brandon and I didn't compare schedules when we went on vacation. And so we both were on vacation the week before when the packet was due. I had notified the planning commission that was the case, that we were going to be out of town and the packet was going to be late. I did detail some of the items that would be forthcoming in the packet. And so that was my error, not getting it out as soon as possible and having that done at the 3 weeks prior. It's just a juggle of time at that point, and that was my error there.
Is the goal to get it out at least a week prior, like it is for council, for planning
Yes, on
commission
the
as well?
Thursday, the week prior.
Okay.
It has been going out on Friday or Saturday, and again, that's just management of time. I'm getting used to how to
That's still
juggle
pretty
that.
good. I mean, that's better than.
Oh, yeah.
Well, but doesn't policy say that all paperwork has to be in 3 weeks in advance? before
Yeah.
it comes?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct, but there's, with that is some review time, so we review it prior to writing the memos, and so,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, and
But yes.
reviewing to see if it's ready to go on the agenda or not.
Yeah, 3 weeks is just for the developer to get everything to you, but it doesn't necessarily require staff to get it to the planning commission
Right,
3
that's
weeks
just
before.
when our time starts.
Gotcha. Thank you for that.
anything else?
Sure, no.
Thank you, everyone.
Sky,
Thank you for
very much
coming
yeah.
in for
Thank
this
you,
on
Sky.
such short notice.
Thank you.
I think it's been very productive, and I think have some positive outcomes here. And
Mayor,
thanks
do you-
for coming.
Of course. Do you mind if I just do a 30-second review to make sure I got everything?
Sure.
Okay. Again, I know this isn't an action item. This is just a work session, but let me at least make sure I didn't miss anything, and I just want to make sure I get it. So development agreement, you're going to at least take a stab at having the verbiage done at a replat, that we agree to do a replat as a townhome, whatever that verbiage is. And that will be in the development agreement, phasing that we originally agreed to. If you want to do the walkway on the east side, I'm okay with that in the development agreement as well, because we're going to try to do that anyway. So those 3 items, development agreement, fencing, masonry wall, sounds like you'd probably prefer to just do the masonry wall and no berm. Garbage services, I'm gonna research that, get some answers from different service providers on what issues are we gonna have with this hammerhead and in general. MLS, I'm gonna talk to people on my team that I wasn't aware of this going on, make sure that stuff gets off MLS, that we don't do anything we're not supposed to be doing. Water-wise plants, take it so it's not just barren. And then lighting, have discussion with you about any kind of lighting concerns you might have.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I got. I miss anything?
I think
got
we're
it
also
all.
gonna
I think
look
you've
at,
got it.
sorry. I was gonna say, look at the, where the change in square footage between the 2 zones went.
Yes, yeah, we still got to resolve the boundary or
Okay.
the zoning and, yeah, development line is.
Got it. Okay,
Okay,
Thank
thank you,
you.
Sky.
thank you so much.
Thanks.
For motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to
Second,
adjourn.
second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thanks again.